Canada's abundant oil and production keeps increasing, is having trouble getting to tidewater. Our guest is a former top marine shipping executive who has worked in the Arctic, who says there's a case to be made for a pipeline going from Alberta to Hudson Bay and then out onto the open oceans. We're joined from Ottawa by Michael Bell, former Senior Vice President at the shipping consortium FedNav. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Your idea would be to ship this oil across a lot of muskeg, across the prairies to Hudson Bay. Wouldn't it be enormously expensive, though, the logistics involved?
Well, I don't know much about getting it across from to Hudson Bay, but I've been assured that this is possible. I've talked to the people in Alaska, and they say they can do that sort of thing. I know that it can be shipped by a boat from Hudson Bay to anywhere you want in the world. Is that what you want?
Yes, that's fine. Now, on that subject, though, doesn't it get icy in Hudson Bay?
Well, you do, but it's what's called first-year ice, Andrew, which is salt ice, or ice which has got salt in it because it's ice salt water. And therefore it is fragile, or relatively fragile, as opposed to multi-year ice. Two very distinct types of ice. And Hudson Bay melts every summer, so it's always first-year ice. It's always got ice, got salt in it, and we know how to get through that sort of ice at any time of year, summer, winter, you name it.
And you know that oil tankers these days are generally double-hulled, and some of them can actually break through fairly light ice?
Well, yes, they can. I mean, actually, not tankers so far because there hasn't been a need for it, except the Baltic and places like that, which is relatively easy. But we know these new class of ships, which is called a Polar Class 4, is capable of operating 12 months a year through ice conditions which you would have in Hudson Bay. It's as simple as that.
Now, you do know... Sorry, go on, Michael.
I was saying that there are no tankers built to that level. No, sorry, that's wrong. There are lots of tankers built to that level for Russia, but they have conditions which are more than first year. They have what's called multi-year ice to handle, and they're having a lot of trouble.
So, yeah, I mean, I can imagine, yeah, that ice is pretty forbidding. Now, you do know that a shipping port would be needed, and Churchill might not be the place to do it.
Well, you don't need a port for loading oil. You need a spot. You need a place. So it wouldn't be too far away from Churchill where we could find 18 or 19 meters of water. That's all we need. It's for these big ships. They would be big ships. But they couldn't get into Churchill at the present conditions unless they want to do an awful lot of dredging. But we'd find somewhere, I'm sure, within a reasonable distance of Churchill. It only needs 17, 18 meters and we'll be away.
Now, of course, enviros will be watching this and say, well, we don't want to spill in the Arctic. You argue, though, statistically, big spills have been diminishing in recent years.
Well, if you think of the last one, which is, what, the large major spill was something like 28 years ago, 29 years ago. There's been no appreciable spill by a tanker since then, and they're all double hull. That's why if you puncture the outside skin, you've still got another one to get to.
Right, you say
Simple.
The last big spill was in Angola, off Angola in 1991.
Correct, the last big one.
Now you do. Sorry, go on, Michael. I keep cutting you off. Go ahead, Michael.
I'm going to say that I know there have been spills when people have been trying to load cargoes into ships or maybe load the oil for the engine into the ships, but they have been very small. But there have been no breaking of the hull by accident since 1991.
So I'm looking here. Now, you say, of course, that you're not a pipeline guy, you're a shipping guy, but you do, in an op-ed for the Financial Post, have a run at rough estimates here. And I believe you say that getting the oil from Alberta to New Brunswick by pipeline and tanker would be in the order of $6.35 per barrel. So is that expensive by international standards?
Well, the ships are very expensive. They're big, enormous ships, and they're very expensive. I doubt if we could even think of building them in Canada unless we want to really invest millions or billions of dollars on a new facility. But the numbers that I gave you, I think in the $8.35 to St. John, New Brunswick. And I'm quite confident that that is a reasonable number, starting in, assuming that I haven't got everything wrong on the pipeline. But the ships, I'm confident about.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was I think it was an ice-free cost of $6.35, but then your final calculation was $8.35. Yeah.
That's correct, yes. And I down to Houston, if you read, of course, your own paper this morning, you're talking about Houston or talking about the U.S. Gulf, I think we could deliver it for $10 to the Gulf. And only 25 cents more to Europe. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and as you say, the Financial Post reporting today that Canadian heavy oil is getting almost $65 a barrel U.S. in Houston. Pretty attractive.
Right.
Michael, we'll have to leave it there, and I know we'll get lots of reaction. And yep, you got me wishing I could visit Hudson Bay. I hope to get up there some year. Thanks very much.
Yes.
Michael,
okay. Bye bye.
Michael Bell, former senior vice president.